Welcome to our kickoff for 2015, our first speaker series of the new year. So we're so glad you're here. My name is Ray Comiskey. I'm president here at the college, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our very special presentation today. The next couple of speaker series we take on a little bit of a historical theme or slant to it, and hear a little bit about our immediate world as it once was and what it means for us today. So, and our speaker, I think, is highly qualified to talk to us about it. So our speaker is Chris Otto. He's a graduate of Fox High School, and after that he attended Truman State University majoring in English, and graduated in 1993. I think he's bragging. Okay, being that young. From there, Chris went on to attend Southeast Missouri State, where he received a graduate teaching assistantship and graduated with honors in 1995. Chris also received an assistantship at the University of Missouri-Columbia in the Library and Informational Science program. And in 2001, Chris completed those requirements, and from there he moved to California, where he taught at, was it Benicia? All right, I got that one right, high school for 4 years, and then returned to Missouri and taught at Moberly Area Community College and Mineral Area College. We don't hold that against him. Chris has taught Jefferson College since 2012 and is currently an assistant professor of English. He's also a member of the Missouri Folklore Society, the National Council of Teachers of English, and the Two-Year College English Association. His research interests include Southern literature, American Indian literature, and folklore. So today he's here to tell us about the Bootheel Sharecroppers roadside demonstration of 1939. So if you will, help me welcome Chris Otto.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak, and thank you for the wonderful lunch today. I was talking to Dr. Comiskey before the presentation, and I told him that since I've been teaching so long, I have somehow trained myself not to be able to say anything in under an hour. But he said that you guys needed to be out of here by 12:45, so I promised him that I would make good on that commitment. So today what I want to talk to you about is a historical event that had some major implications in terms of this area and the nation at large. And it is a story that I don't think is told particularly often, but it is one that has some very interesting parallels to things that perhaps that we see today. And it also predates the actual civil rights movement by a couple of decades. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about the story itself, but then the main body of the presentation is a look at a series of photographs that were taken by Farm Security Administration photographer Arthur Rothstein. And what I think he does so well in these photographs is he's able to take these individuals, and we get to see a human side to this historical event. So because it's Black History Month, we oftentimes kind of recycle these sort of mythic, larger-than-life figures, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, George Washington Carver, and sometimes it's difficult to sort of understand the historical significance of these movements in terms of the lives of individuals. And so that is what I want to look at. This event was organized by Owen Whitfield, who was a sharecropper born in Mississippi in 1894, and he came to the Bootheel in the 20s, and he was a itinerant pastor as well as a sharecropper. On the night before, one of the planning meetings, which was held in the church, these are some quotes that he was reportedly said to his followers. And I don't know how well you can see them, but I'll read them here. And Moses got him to the Red Sea, and they made camp there. And here come old boss pharaohs riding bosses in their chariots. And Moses raised his hand, and the waters parted, and the children of Israel walked across dry land. We're going to make an exodus likewise. It's history repeating itself in 1939. He was a union organizer, and in January of 1939, most of the sharecroppers in the Bootheel received eviction notices. They were going to be asked to leave the land, partly because of some of the New Deal policies, where the Roosevelt administration was going to pay farmers not to plant cotton, so they didn't have any need for as many workers. So Whitefield and members of his different churches needed to make some kind of a stand. They needed to draw attention to their plight. This was covered by Sam Armstrong of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and in 1939. So his role in this biblical passage here is to draw a parallel between the plight of the sharecroppers and that of the Israelites. And his role as the organizer, he has union ties as well to that of Moses, the leader. So on the morning of January 10th, 1939, anybody who was driving on Highway 60, which sort of cuts through Poplar Bluff, Sikeston towards Charleston, or Highway 61, which was the main north-south route, would have seen as many as 2,000 people with their belongings camped out on the side of the road. This was a planned and deliberate attempt to draw national attention and to draw photographers and media to cover this story and hopefully draw attention to the sharecroppers' plight. They were being marginalized because of bad policy, but also because of the way that the landowners treated the labor force. Each of the camps was assigned a captain or a leader, and William H. Jones, who was outside of one of these camps outside of Sikeston, said, "We have no place to go. We don't know whether this will do us any good, but it will show people what we are up against." And so the idea was to strike out onto go out onto the highway and make yourself visible, and to try to see what kind of attention you could grab. Well, what were the conditions like? This is a photograph of a typical sharecropper's cabin in the Bootheel. This is a depiction of the landscape, very labor intensive. And they weren't paid well at all. You can see the average gross income for renters. These would be people who owned their tools and their animals and paid rent to farm a piece of land. They would, on average, earn $854 a year. Sharecroppers who did not own anything and had to be provided what was called a furnish, which would be seeds, clothes, tools, animals, on average, after their bill for their furnish was paid off, was about $415. The Bootheel and in general the cotton plantation system was moving more and more towards simply hiring day laborers, and they were really only needed in the fall and in the springtime. They were averaging about $264 a year. The average African American salary was $251 no matter what category, and that's from an FSA report from 1939. Not only was the pay terrible, the living conditions were largely unlivable, but disease was rampant, dysentery, typhoid, malaria, because this area was a swamp. There was lots of mosquito-borne illnesses as well. So this was not a livable situation. And so what we have then is Arthur Rothstein's, the bulk of this presentation are a look at his images that he shot. These are all available through the Library of Congress. You can go home and look at these or any others that you like. He was paid by the Roosevelt administration to travel into depressed areas to take pictures, and they use these images for various government programs to draw attention to different issues that were facing the rural poor. And so this is we'll talk about the image in just a second, but this is from a letter that Rothstein wrote, and I think that he succinctly identifies really the cause behind the decision to go out on the road. The situation was created when the planters gave the croppers the alternative of getting off the land or remaining as day laborers. The move to the highways was a public protest against a kind of economic slavery. pretty powerful statement there. And what I really like about this image here is in sort of the center position here, you have almost a symbol of modernity, the power line, and sort of this really fragile, tenuous kind of shelter. Everything seems to be about ready to kind of fall down, but kind of against that fragility, you have these two young boys over here who look quite sort of stout and strong. And I think it's a really interesting mix in terms of composition. Modernity with the power, the fact that this looks like it could fall over at any time, and the fact that in light of that, we're still sort of strong here and we are still present, even though they're kind of off to the side. This image, the other one sort of suggested kind of an imbalance. This image seems to be one that is very balanced in the sense that their belongings are kind of neatly stacked over here. Again, this doesn't look particularly strong, but their heads are kind of above that horizon line. She, I think, might be pregnant, although I've learned never to assume that and never say that to a woman. But she won't get mad at me if I say that. And she's sort of turned towards him in kind of a dignified pose. I don't get the sense of sort of victimhood here. There's a sense of pride, and there's a sense of balance and stability in terms of the family and his posture, hands sort of comfortably in the pockets, and the fact that they're kind of above this land and their meager belongings are neatly stacked by them. Whitfield is supposed to have used this verse quite frequently in the lead up to the event. The foxes have holes, the birds of heaven have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head. We are homeless, we have nowhere to go. And the other thing about Rothstein's image here is that it makes these people become human and real. If you look at many of the other newspaper-generated photographs of the event, they are from a great distance. They are long view shots. They're just sort of pictures of junk on the side of the road, and you don't get the sense of a human being behind the suffering. I love this image because I like to think of this as like the grandmother and her two daughters and then their children here. This has an interesting sort of composition here. All the power and the weight is on this side, and there's these sort of little children down here who seem kind of devious. With his finger sort of forcing up a smile, or maybe not. And the fact that these men are all sort of, their attention is drawn inside this tent here. Rothstein also took this woman and made a close-up picture of her. Very powerful, very strong woman. She's got holes in the sweater. It's held together by a safety pin. But then on the outside of that, she has like another coat that has some kind of fur around the edge. And if you look at enough of these images, you don't see like parkas and heavy coats. They didn't have really heavy coats. It's interesting to see this woman and the look on her face. It's not one of, please take care of me. It's not one of, I can't do for myself. It's one of, if you give me a chance, I will make do. And the sharecroppers who were at the protest were asked, and 90% of them said, all we want is the right to farm land and a decent pay, and we can kind of take care of ourselves. But the system and the social culture of the time was really sort of squeezing these people out of that particular role. I love this image right here. The woman looks like she's actually in her body. Posture echoes that of a cotton picker, as though she were working the rows. And from the accounts of the time, we know that large families were a necessity for sharecroppers. The women who gave birth would take no more than a day off from the cotton picking, and oftentimes would place the baby at the end of the row, pick the cotton to where the baby lay, nurse the baby, put the baby on the end of the other row, pick the cotton, and pick the child up on the other end. It was also common practice to take a little rag and dip it in sugar water and have the baby suck on that. I don't know what her children's status is, but the look on her face is sort of defiant in the sense that she's smiling. Her body's in this sort of hunched posture, and the fact that all of this stuff is sort of lined up, it's as though she's carrying this immense burden behind her. And the fact that the truck is sort of driving in the opposite direction, seemingly suggestive of being left behind somehow. I think this is a wonderful image here. This is a verse from a song that John L. Hancock, who was a Southern Town Farmers Union poet and songwriter, and you can find recordings of these on the internet. Homeless, homeless are we, just as homeless can be. We don't get nothing for our labor, so raggedy, raggedy are we. And John L. Hancock knew Owen Whitfield, and he was part of the planning of the event. Whitfield did not stay in the Bootheel during the demonstration. He fled to St. Louis because of death threats. The people who were involved in the demonstration did so against the very real possibility of violence and intimidation. The demonstration itself lasted about a week before the state officials, the Governor Stark, and the local county officials declared the camps to be a health hazards, and they were then forced in state vehicles and they were moved. And we'll talk about that in the next section of images. This picture, when I first looked at it, I thought she was holding, just glancing at it, don't ignore this, you'd think she's holding a Bible, the way she is sort of, or holding it almost like a child. Well, I looked at this really closely and it said Big Ben. And I thought, all right, Big Ben, it must be a clock. So, thanks to the internet, I searched it, and yeah, Big Ben, it looks like it'd probably be about this, the box would be about the same size. So it's the fact that she's holding this clock, as I think that it speaks to the value of this family clock, and how she's holding it so close. She's not just letting it sit in those piles of stuff. She's holding it with her. She's holding it in a way that is almost reminiscent of the way a person might clutch a Bible to his or her heart in a time of great peril. The fact that she's holding this signifies how much value that piece of, that really simple piece of technology has for her, as well as perhaps what the story behind that clock is. How did she get it? Who gave it to her? And the look on her face, again, is one of a kind of quiet dignity, but one that's also defiant, in a sense that this was an attempt to highlight the inhumane practices of sharecropping and the way that they had been marginalized. I also like to think of the clock here in terms of the clock is sort of running out on this way of life, that this approach to agriculture is in fact kind of dying out. And we see that there's more and more incentive to mechanize, and there is really less and less of a need for the type of labor that sharecropping provided. This was not just this was not just a black movement, although the leader, Owen Whitfield, was black, and a large portion of the sharecroppers were black. There were plenty of whites who were involved. The fact that there were whites who took to the streets with blacks in 1939 upset the very sort of fundamental social code in the Bootheel. This is from Thad Snow's autobiography. It was incomprehensible and therefore sinister to every right-thinking observer and defender of the social order. The fact that this was a multiracial movement was shocking. And not only was the fact that there were white peoples there, that was shocking, the fact that the sharecroppers themselves had taken it upon themselves to plan and execute this event. The people who were driving on 60 and 61 that morning in those days could not believe their eyes. Because here were these people who had moved out of the shadows, who had moved out of the margins of society and put themselves and their lives on display in an attempt to plead for some kind of relief and justice. I love this image. She's got her sewing machine. She's sitting on it. His stare is not directly into the camera. It's not right at us. It's somewhere down around here. And you can see the pain and the expression of exhaustion in this young wife's face here. So this is an interesting moment in history, 1939, and you see whites and blacks working together in ways that we don't really see again until the civil rights era with Dr. King. This image is interesting because this man is making no attempts to hide his gaze. He's looking right at you, and I think the expression on the face here, again, this is a strong, powerful man. This is not a weak victim. The fact that he's holding the baby, I love how, you know, the white unstained shoes, and he's staring right at you saying, look at me, notice me, I am a human being. And the fact that the baby's sort of looking off, I kind of like to think that this child is sort of looking off into the distance, hoping for a better future than his father has here. The fact that this man also holding the baby, large, powerful hands, kind of forces us to think about many of the stereotypes and assumptions about African American males at the time and now as well. Seeing him as a father and as a nurturer, as a caregiver, kind of throws some of those assumptions into disarray. The sharecroppers, as they took the road, were reported to have been singing vigorously, spirituals. Remember, these are the sons and the grandsons, or the daughters and granddaughters of slaves, and in many ways their lives aren't much better. And before I'll be a slave again, I'll be buried in my grave. A plea for dignity, a plea to recognize the common humanity, and the fact that he's holding the child, I think, inspires a great deal of pathos or emotion on the part of the viewer. This one, again, I selected this one particularly for the picture, for the image, her facial expression. And almost the subtext here seems to be, hey, white photographer, you're getting on my nerves now. And I'm kind of shooting daggers here at you. But again, the clutching of the child and the sort of collection of items so meager. You can see these sort of cylindrical tins that say American Sunrise. I didn't know what those were. I don't know if anybody remembers them, but they were used to hold lard, and apparently they kept these and used them as storage containers. It's interesting that, you know, amidst this kind of image of I would sort of call this anger, defiance, challenging kind of glare, and the sort of upside down tables here, the whole world, the whole life of this person and this family has literally been turned upside down. And the fact that this little American sunrise, you know, it's sort of a cheery, upbeat kind of a notion, is down here in the lower left-hand column, kind of, again, kind of an interesting tension within that picture. And Whitfield is also reported to have said, if you need to take your eyes out of the sky because somebody is stealing your bread. His message was one of protest, and it's time for us to stand up and claim our dignity, claim our place in the historical narrative. Well, after 2 or 3 days and newspaper coverage from Memphis, St. Louis, New York, Chicago, all over the country convened on this area. There were newsreel footage taken. There was many newspaper accounts and photographs that were showing up in magazines. President Roosevelt became aware of the situation. Owen Whitfield gained an audience with President Roosevelt. His wife, Zella Whitfield, sat down with Eleanor. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote one of her weekly newspaper columns. It was called My Time, about Zella and the sharecroppers' plight in southeast Missouri. And Roosevelt is, from one of his correspondence about the issue, about the sharecroppers' situation, he wrote, "This situation, serious as it is for the individual families, is even more serious as a symptom of the widespread situation existing throughout the South." And I like that because he's looking at it in a fairly broad context, part of a larger narrative. This is not just an isolated incident. This is part of something larger. And I picked this image in particular because the boy is staring down here. The fire is essentially gone out, and he's sort of next to the potbelly stove here. And again, there's some more of those American Sunrise lard containers. People used a lot of lard back then. This seems to be, the fact that there's no one in, the chair is empty also kind of heightens this sense of kind of alienation and loneliness as well. I think as a viewer, it can tug at the heartstrings, and I suppose it should as well, in terms of what does this boy, what does he have to look forward to in this era. Well, the worst that could possibly happen happened after a couple of days on the side of the road. It's January, it snows, the temperature drops, and now you've got people who are exposed, and you saw some of those tents and some of those structures. The Red Cross refused to intervene. Some of the accounts suggest that the reason why the Red Cross wouldn't get involved is because they were threatened by the planners that if you got involved you could count on no more donations. The state of Missouri, Governor Stark, declared the area a health hazard, and the state police were sent with state vehicles to load these the people and their belongings up and move them off of the streets to get them back out of the public view. And there's really the interesting question that I had when I first started looking at the image was what were the local responses? And there's this man, Charles Blanton, who published editorials in the Sikeston Standard. He is a really strong defender of the status quo. In one of his pieces, he even suggests that we reform the KKK and let's fight fire with fire and let's crush these people back into submission. But I thought, you know, it's hard to know what Rothstein thought when he looked at this image, but man, when I see this image, this sort of potbelly police officer with the jack boots and the cigar chomping, it sort of evokes every kind of you know, cliche, I guess, response about the sort of heavy-handed approach of police or law enforcement. There are sort of accounts of people getting roughed up, people getting beat up during this event by police, by locals. But here we go again. Now we're back on the road and we are going to be moved away. So Blanton says he lays the blame on the doorstep of Whitfield, the agitator. One of the farmers on the LaForge project is at the bottom of the roadside spectacle and should be dispossessed of his lease on the house and acreage. So Blanton here is a Sykeston resident, and he's calling for retribution against Whitfield. The LaForge project that he refers to there was an attempt by the Roosevelt administration to build some housing and provide land for displaced rural workers. And Whitfield and his family, through the help of Thad Snow, were able to get into this project, but it wasn't nearly enough to meet the needs of all of the displaced workers. So again, he's sort of the supervisor. These guys are struggling. Of course, he's not going to help. And again, it's a compelling narrative that begins to sort of come together as you look at each of the images as a text and as a narrative. This is again part of the image of we're picking up and we're leaving the roadside and we're going to be loaded onto these trucks and taken somewhere else. The claim that this was a health hazard was kind of a flimsy claim, although in light of where they went. What I liked about this image was the idea of the junction here. The place that they were taken became known as Homeless Junction. It was actually on a spillway behind a levee in New Madrid County. And in fact, in 1937, there had been a terrible flood in this area. And many of these people were living there a year ago. And the Corps of Engineers decided to breach the levee on the Missouri side to save Cairo, Illinois. And all of a sudden, they were wiped out by another bad decision. Most of the people were not alerted to the fact that they were going to open the levee and had to retreat in water that was up to their thighs and with their animals and their possessions in tow. So here we are, we're back to that place again. But I like the idea of the junction, the idea of a crossroads. You know, which way are we going to go? Are we going to get on the path of success and integration, and or are we going to kind of go back to where we were? This is Arthur Rothstein. This is indicative of most of the newspaper photographs taken of the demonstration. As you can see, it's a wide shot. It's not one that invites an intimate human kind of interaction when you read it or when you look at it. And Rothstein only took a few of these pictures, and then he kind of moves on. And I don't know exactly what the rationale for, why he didn't, take more of those pictures, those close-ups of individuals. But this is the big open area. It is in a more remote location so that the protesters are out of sight, and we remove them. This is Rothstein's. This is how he felt about where they were moved. He writes, "The demonstrators are much worse off now than they were before the state troopers moved them from the highway. While they were on the roads, people brought them food and clothing, though the Red Cross refused to do anything under threats of no contributions from the planners. Most of the demonstrators are in open fields or barns away from the public eye." And so a large portion of the 15 to 1,700 families ended up here, and then they are going to be distributed in everything from old churches to old dance halls to different buildings. But the point here at about day 5 or 6 that the protest has largely been broken up, and the protesters have been sort of scattered or removed to off-site locations. Yeah, I mean, in this you can tell that this is really sort of soggy. You can see how much the tires have sunk in. I don't know if this is like a body of water here, but this is just open, empty field, and Rothstein, at least for his point of view, thinks it's much worse than where they were. So this is an image taken of what became known as Cropperville. In the aftermath of the protest, a core group of about 40 or 50 families bought a parcel of land in Butler County outside of Poplar Bluff and essentially established a commune with the help of Lincoln University students, Quakers, and various other charitable organizations. They built a small community. They had a school and clinic. And through the loan programs provided by some of the New Deal, they bought this piece of land. It was marginal land. It lasted about a decade before people sort of moved off the land and went off into different cities or different locations. The Roosevelt demonstration, or the Roosevelt administration, did indeed hear the pleas of the sharecroppers, and they built these Delmo housing projects. Delmo means Delta, Missouri, Missouri Delta. They were a group, there were I think 8 of these different sort of communities. Individuals could buy homes with clean water. There was health care provided on site, and there was land for individuals to farm. I like this image because the sort of base structure of the water tower, that's what I'm guessing this is built, but it hasn't sort of been completed. It sort of suggests this kind of work in progress, this step in the right direction, but we're not there yet. Of course, in the sort of congressional process to fund these groups, they were resisted in many instances, and again, not nearly enough was done to fully house and care for these people. But these, there are still a few of these sort of communities. They're no longer under the auspices of the federal government. They became privatized in the 50s. But you can look and locate some of these on the web now. But this was a real step up. This really gave people hope. And this improved the lives of these people and their children and their grandchildren significantly from where they had been. And what I want to sort of close with is thinking about images. What do we see? And how do we locate these in a larger historical context? And we can't really talk about this without really at least paying attention to the events here in Ferguson. This is not from the protesters' demonstration. This is from the civil rights era. This also is from Selma, Alabama. This is from Ferguson, and ultimately I feel like what these images are designed, or what they do for me, is they reinforce the humanity of the individuals who are in the pictures. And just as the marchers in the 60s are carrying signs to reaffirm their humanity, I am a man. We saw these same signs again in the march from Ferguson to the state capitol. And we're sort of in that phase, that post-protest phase, where we try to decide what it meant and what to do with it. And the final line that I have here, and it sort of is just to sort of leave you with a final thought here. Again, I'm an English guy, so I got to find a way to work in a great author like Mark Twain. And he's from Missouri, too. So history, although sometimes made up of the acts of the great, is more often shaped by the many acts of the small. And I think that's kind of a fitting way to end the presentation. And I'm right on time, right? So I would open it up to any kind of questions or comments or thoughts that you had. Otherwise, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And I hope that I gave you something to think about on your way out the door and maybe later on. Yes, ma'am.
I was in the 37 flood.
Oh, wow, okay.
Mount Vernon, Indiana.
Okay.
5 miles from the Ohio River.
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, my father worked in Evansville, Indiana, and he finally got off the railroad to come get us. And after we left, the people that lived down closer to the river came and stayed at our house.
Okay.
And when they left, they put our beds up on tables.
Oh, okay.
And we was saved.
Well, that's
I was 12 years old.
Well, that's an amazing story. A lot different than now. We know these floods are coming and everybody can prepare and we're sandbagging. None of that. The river just kept coming up. Yeah, interesting. Yes, sir.
The eviction of the sharecroppers, did that cause a migration to the larger cities? Is that part of
Some of the sharecroppers were allowed to go back under different sort of contractual obligations. But most of these people either went to the Cropperville or found housing in those Delmo groups, or they went back to Arkansas or Tennessee. They were largely, illiterate and had no skills besides, cotton farming. And so that great migration that you're talking about, I would sort of categorize this event as sort of a part of that, but I didn't get the sense from researching this. Some people did go to St. Louis, but I think it was a small minority because these are rural, agrarian people, and I think it took a while for at least these people to migrate. But I know that Whitfield had ties in St. Louis. There, he founded a group called the St. Louis Organization for Sharecropper Reform or something like that. So there was communication, and there's a possibility that did happen. But in all the reading that I didn't get a sense that this was people put down their farming stuff and migrated to the cities. Most of them wanted to continue doing that. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, because I grew up in Memphis.
Okay.
And there are a lot of things that just now make sense. My daddy had a shoe store in Memphis, and it was a great scandal because he would serve black people and had some wide benches that were for black people and narrow seats for white people. And kids used to, they were all over me because I waited on those black people. And they really did work right up against starvation an awful lot. And I can understand a lot of what I really didn't understand before you gave us this talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad for your comments. And this movement clearly has important ties to Memphis because Memphis is a sort of a center for the unionization effort that was underway. And I didn't really build that into this presentation, but there were a couple of different efforts to unionize farm labor. One of them was the Southern Tenant Farm Union that Whitfield was a part of. There was another union that was fledgling in Alabama. And of course, many of these people would have migrated into the Bootheel from Memphis and Mississippi because of the failure of the cotton crop in the 20s and 30s. The boll weevil and the bad flooding and the droughts. And once the Bootheel was drained, it opened it up to agriculture. And so when the cotton came, they brought the cotton plantation system with them. And we were talking before the presentation, if you go to Cape Girardeau and you go down that little hill just south of Cape Girardeau, you are in the northern edge of the Mississippi River Delta, and it is as flat as the table in front of you, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. And
there's a little bit of irony as well. You mentioned the breaching of the levee at Cairo. you know, that debate still goes on.
It still
today.
goes on today.
And ironically, the argument against breaching it falls along racial lines as well. That there are some things in that area, just, I don't know how far they've progressed, you'd say.
Yeah, that's, I mean, right. That is an interesting point in terms of managing the river and in terms of, you know, managing, you know, the different interests in the people who are there. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I grew up near Sykeston as a little girl. Grandma gave me a little sack on my shoulder, and I picked cotton because that was the way to babysit me.
Oh, okay.
I think World War II was a big instigator in breaking this because my mom went to St. Louis to work.
Yeah.
And a lot of them did, and that helped a lot.
That did help. Yeah. So what are your memories of picking the cotton? What was?
At that time, I was not as tall as the cotton. I remember there were roots on that cotton.
Okay.
That's
Didn't
what
like the boll weevil.
I didn't like that. And that's what I remember about it.
You know, I can't imagine it. I mean, to think that, you know, you'd have those bags were really long.
They made me a special one out of the pillowcase. Grandma made me one.
Oh, they made you.
I could pull it because
Okay.
they were watching me. You know.
Okay.
Her grandma and grandpa were sharecroppers.
Her grand. Okay.
Yes.
Wow, that's interesting. I wonder if they have any ties with these people or any of these events.
Well, she was born in '39, so just about when that
Just when it happened, yeah.
She remembers growing up in a sharecropper's cabin and that, so
Wow, that's
wasn't
interesting.
a nice
It
one.
does, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of photographs of the interior. There's, you know, there's like newspaper to try to keep the wind out inside there. Did somebody else have a hand up? Thank you.
A lot of those people were absorbed back on the farm. After that was over, the government program did not cut out all of the growth of cotton, it simply put a limit on how much
Right.
growth. And a lot of them moved back over the farms, and were very, blacks were very prominent all over the Bootheel for years and years. Not so many now, but that was the case. Not all of them had to leave.
Good. Thank you. Excellent point. Any other? Yes, sir.
Sounds like the mistakes of this era ended up in flooding government money in without proper management and creation of Food IGO and the concentrated area of St. Louis that created the new problems.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that to make those connections, I think that is really sort of incumbent upon us to you know, critique it, to understand the story, and then to try to learn from the mistakes and to try to replicate any of the successes. But I think your point is really well made, and especially in terms of many of the Agricultural Adjustment Act and many of these pieces of legislation that were designed to help farmers ended up making it even worse. And you know, how do we fix that? What kinds of remedies are there for that? But that's an excellent point.
Let me close this part. I'm sure Chris will stay on. I guess
Sure.
the lesson learned is
Sure.
those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We've all heard that before. So let's give Chris a round of applause, please.